So we have all of these experiments. We had the early MOOCs, which people now call CMOOCs, the connectivist MOOCs, which are based in connectivist pedagogy. And then we have these XMOOCs, which are based on more traditional approaches like lecture, some self-study materials, and then do an exam. It seems there's something missing in the middle. Something which is more structured and with more guidance than connectivism, but also more innovative with more interaction and more support than the XMOOCs. And I was thinking about this. I think everyone is thinking about how to solve this equation of having volumes and not being so traditional in your approach. And I thought that would the community of inquiry framework be updatable or upgradable to a sort of community of inquiry 2.0, in which you would have the focus not in the class or the cohort of 20, 25 students, but you would have a much bigger cohort, which you could consider almost like a community or a network. But still function in the same principles of the teaching presence, the social presence, the cognitive presence. Do you think it could revive the model? Because it was one of the most successful models in the constructivist points of view in the academic studies. And so in your article, you speak about these three generations, the instructivist, the constructivist, and then connectivism. And constructivism is missing in these new experiences, or at least in part.
Well, the second generation was social constructivism, but the way we talked about it was in terms of the way it evolved in the community of inquiry model, where Randy Garrison and I looked at the sort of instructivist models of dissemination, the first generation, and we were really trying to make a place for the collaborative discovery and a teacher presence, active presence. But we only thought about a max of about 30 students, and it's interesting, that's become, when you talk about e-learning, at least before the MOOCs, that's basically what most people think about or that's what they mean, is this group of 30 people all starting at the same time and ending at the same time, and closed environment within a learning management system. But we haven't been able to press out in terms of numbers beyond that. There's been very few experiments where people have gotten up to even 50, let alone 200, let alone 20,000.
I think that's one of the things missing in these experiments with big numbers is how do you support learning in ways that we did when we had a cohort of 20 or 25 people.
Right. Well, I think that the most promising, I guess, is to really empower and train students to be more active peer supporters. And I like the University of the People. And before you can take any courses, they talk about themselves as being the first tuition-free university, at least in America. But the first course you take, you learn how to collaborate, how to peer review other students' work. And then they use retired professors and other volunteers to add some more teachers' presence on top of content that they get from OERs around the world. So, but that's a big challenge because students, in a traditional distance ed environment, the more you make students do that, there's a real resistance, especially amongst younger and undergraduate students who say, that's your job, you're the teacher, you do the teaching presence, don't expect me to do it.
Yeah, I was seeing from this point of view, even when we defined teaching presence in the community of inquiry model, you always said that the teaching presence did not have to be
the teacher.
It could be a peer who had studied or who had developed competencies in that area. It could be a specialist, it could be an expert. And when you look at it from the point of view of a network, it can be someone on the network who is knowledgeable, who has expertise, and who is willing to share his knowledge with the people and give some guidance or some modeling. So this would be a mix of connectivism with a bit of a more social constructivist approach.
Yeah, I think it has to evolve that way because, at least in my experience of the CMOOCs, they rely too much on the autonomous drive of the students and the lack of specific guidance and support. It seems like it works for the real active, eager beavers, the people who have got lots of skills already, But
most people doing these CMOOCs are PhDs with
Yeah.
a lot of experience in their field, so
yeah.
it's not the typical students you would have, right?
No. But I think even, well, we did some experiments with in social constructivist kind of community of inquiry model, where we would break down into small groups for the class, and charge students with doing tutorials, leading those tutorials. I think that students are still ready to be directed by teachers, and sometimes they're over dependent, but nonetheless, to give nothing or very little doesn't work for many students in a connectivist. Giving too much in an instructivist doesn't work either. So I think we need to develop, but that's the big issue for the community of inquiry 2.0, as you suggest, is scalability, because it was never designed with, that. And I'm not sure exactly how it'll work.
I would have one last question, because our time is running up, and that is something else you proposed around the same time, 2003, I suppose, and which, I mean, the things you've been proposing seem to remain current for a long time, which is good. And I'm talking about this interaction equivalency theorem that you proposed in 2003. Basically, it says that from the three interactions, student content, and student-teacher, if one of these interactions is of high quality, the learning will be of good quality. So the other two interactions can be minimal or even non-existent, because you don't see an impact on the quality of learning. And if you add another one of these interactions, you'll get a higher degree of satisfaction. This was basically what these...
And a higher cost.
And the more you add, the more it costs.
Yeah.
When I look at it, what I find interesting is that this theorem kind of validates or supports all these experiences that people have been trying.
Yeah.
You know, because all of them have a strong focus on one of the interactions.
One of the three.
Content in the case of XMOOCs, interaction among peers in the case of the CMOOCs. Do you think this is still a valid construct to work with? Have you changed a bit of your mind in terms of what's one of these interactions being more important than the others?
Yeah, right. I don't think so, because I think it's something we've known for a long time. Like, if you do have a very effective peer support network, as in a study group, you probably have had that where you get a terrible professor and the textbook's no good, and you would never have survived without having those peer-to-peer. And certainly when you get a one-to-one tutorial, as in the Cambridge or Oxford model or something like that, that's very high quality too. But to say that people can't watch television and learn without either of those two, with just interacting with the content, assuming that content may be a talking head of a professor or something. So it was kind of, I kept thinking one summer, thinking about these three forms and thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if there was some kind of a magical formula that you could say, this is the formula for this topic or this subject. And then after about a month of my summer holidays, it sort of dawned on me, well, maybe they are all equivalent, and you could just sort of do that. But the problem was, it wasn't a very good theorem, because I couldn't prove it or disprove it one way or the other. So nice thing to talk about, but where does it get you? But then I've been pleasantly surprised by a metadata analysis that was done at Concordia University, where they tried to see, when you increase one of those three, whether it really made a difference, and it basically supported the theory. So that was flattering.
So it's still going on and still...
Yeah, but then the nice thing about it is that these MOOCs are a classic example, the X and the C MOOCs, where you can get people who will argue all day which is the better of those, and I think learning can happen in both of them.
And the fact is, they produce about the same dropout rates.
Yeah, right.
And so they kind of have the same problems of keeping people in the course. I think our time is up.
Okay.
I have to thank you for a very, very interesting conversation, and of course for accepting the interview and being with us. I'm very happy to have this privilege.
Thank you. It's such a nice thing to have somebody who's so knowledgeable about this area to talk about. I've
studied a lot of what you've published and shared with us so openly, and I hope you have a good stay in Portugal.
Well, thank you very much. It's my honor.